later on.
Just for anyone watching, so there some strange people appearing. Okay.
Yes. So we also have apologies for the whole meeting for Councillor Harvey and Councillor Martin.
Thank you. Item 1, minutes of last meeting.
The minutes of the last meeting were included within the agenda pack. Is everybody happy for those to be signed by the chair?
Yep. Thank you, Becky. Item 2, response to questions from the last meeting.
So within the pack, you have had the responses to questions arising from the last meeting. 2 of those are still awaiting a response, and I'll continue to chase that, and obviously we'll circulate that with you once I have them, but we'll leave that on the agenda for next time so that they're obviously part of the published responses for you. Is there any questions on the ones that were there? Or no?
So we're happy with the responses. Excellent, thank you. Members' interests.
Yes, I have to declare an interest for an item much later in the agenda, as I am an employee of Carter Jonas. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd also.
Oh, sorry. Go on,
Oh,
you
sorry.
carry on.
I've also like to declare an interest, obviously, on the market town paper. We'll be talking about St Ives, and I'm a district councillor for St Ives.
Do I need to declare an interest as a member of DMC as we've got planning, as we're discussing planning? I'll just, yeah, just.
Councillor Wells.
As a fellow St Ivan, likewise in terms of the market town for St Ives. Thank you.
And Councillor Slade.
It's the same, so I'm on DMC.
So you'll notice there's been a change. We've brought forward the overview and scrutiny work programme rather than having it at the end. We thought it would be easier to actually have it earlier in the discussion. Yes, please.
So as you will see from the agenda pack, normally or historically, we've had the notice of key decisions at this point and then the overview and scrutiny work programme at the very end of the agenda. Those 2 items really do run alongside each other. So we've pulled them together for this agenda and hopefully going forward, depending on your feedback and how you think that works. And I've rejigged the work programme slightly so that we can see it as an agenda plan as well as what work is going on in the working groups. So hopefully that clarifies things for everybody and makes it a bit easier to read, but the 2 documents are sitting alongside each other and as you'll see, they do feed into each other quite well. Are there any questions or comments, or is there anything anybody would like to add into the potential further issues that we can have a look at? I know Councillor Gardner has emailed me some suggestions which I will add in for and going forward. Is there anything else anybody would like to add or any feedback on how that's been rejigged? Take silence as positive then.
Thank you for all of those who responded to that. It's helpful. Item 5. Goodness. Planning services update.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. Good evening to members. So I'm delighted to report update on the planning service. Report I think is really comprehensive and provides quite a lot of data. But I think there's a couple of highlights here, or more than a couple of highlights. I'm really pleased at the progress that we're making, and it's thanks to the hard work of the team, to Julian, to Clara, and others. I think it's fair to say we've had a lot of bumps in the road, particularly during COVID, and I think the new policies, not accepting amendments, the pre-app service is really starting to turn things around. Of course, we can always look at improvements, but I think the service is performing really well. And if you look through 24th of October 2022, we had 329 planning applications, which were over 26 weeks. 1st of April 2023, that was down to 218. That was a reduction of 34%. And again, looking through some of the other facts in the report, I think enforcement as well, we've really made a lot of good progress there. A number of tricky cases coming up, which Julie will go through later. We have a new arboriculturalist, a gentleman called Stephen Bones, who's really made a great impact as well. As of 24th of October 2022, we had 329 tree-related applications outstanding. 28th of August 2023, this was reduced to 45 cases, and that was an 87% reduction in that service. And I said planning enforcement at the end of 2019, there were almost 1,500 cases open. That's now reduced to 652. And of that figure, 218 are deemed to be backlog. The remainder are cases on hand, and they're actioned in a priority approach based on the level of harm and wider public interest. And also, planning services, is doing a lot of work on preparing local plan. We're making some strides on that. We've had a lot of interest from developers, from town and parish councils, a lot of sites of interest. Also keeping up with our 5-year supply of land. A couple of other things, neighbourhood plans. Really pleased with the way the parishes and towns have responded to this. We'll be taking the Saltree neighbourhood plan to full council this time next week, in fact. We've got quite a few others in the pipeline. Also a couple of other things, I think, on SIL. We're looking at the governance. We've got some progress to make on that. I was in a meeting last week with Councillor Simon Taylor regarding some of the outstanding 106 sums that you'll see in our infrastructure report. We made a little bit of progress on that. Was hoping to be able to update members this evening, but hopefully there will be something sent out from the Open Spaces team in the next few days. Fair to say as well that we're waiting for central government to confirm where they are with their SIL review. They're wanting to reform it, and we need some clarity there, which I hope will be forthcoming very soon. So that's a quick tour through the report. Happy to take questions from members. Thank you.
Floor is open. Councillor Conway.
Thank you, Chair. I'll kick us off. They've got a couple, if that's fine, if that's okay. The amendment program, not allowing amendments. That was obviously introduced to do a job, and it's clearly working, which is it's helped the situation. But as that progresses, is there any appetite to I'm not saying water it down, or is there an appetite to look at that? Because I know that there isn't an element as well of people coming forward that sort of saying that that's potentially stifling them a little bit. But it's a fine balance, and I completely get that. This is not I'm not trying to be an awkward, sort of, it's not been an awkward question, but just thinking, is that something that's going to be reviewed? It's worked, but can we sort of filter that out at some point? I'll let you answer that one before I go to the second one, if that's okay.
As you know, Steve, we still have amendments for the bigger sites, but I think the problem was some of the applications we were getting in weren't of particularly good quality. So the amendments were having to be submitted. That was taking up a lot of officer time, as you know, and planning is one of those few services where you can have multiple clients. You're not just trying to serve one person. You've got lots of other other authorities, statutory bodies to please. So it was taking up a bit of time. I think you're right. It's worked. I think it's worked really well.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. If I just may amplify some of the thinking around the no amendment policy, you're absolutely right. At the time, it was an end. The end justifies the means, so to speak, insofar as we need to erode the backlog. I think that was a clear political priority. But as we move forward, clearly we will be guided by yourselves as members and how to progress. But I think interestingly, for us as officers, it's about becoming a sustainable service, both financially and being equitable to all those who use our service. So for an example, the Planning Advisory Service did a local fees project a little while back. And what they found was essentially, if you take a national average, a householder application costs in the region of about £130, £131. The national average is actually £408 to progress that application. When you think about building in amendments, when you think about the sustainability of being able to deal with additional applications. If we take the theme of minor applications, which might be, say, the erection of a new dwelling, for example, whereby the national charge is in the region of £410, the national average is actually £783 to process that application. So if we're being encouraged to be more sustainable financially as much as anything else, well, those figures clearly indicate that we are running at a deficit. But to remedy the approach to no amendments is why we set up the pre-application service. And that's the arena where we are more than happy to talk to people, work with them on their submission. Yes, it's a chargeable service, but again, being honest and transparent, it is that commercial thinking. And the idea being then that when it comes into the planning application space, it moves through. So everybody is treated equally. But as Councillor Sanderson has rightly said, we do take a flexible approach to large scale major applications. And they are the applications which would be 200 homes or more, for example, or large scale inward investment, for example. But the more transactional side to planning, namely householders, single dwellings, we have to strike a balance between cost and efficiency and making sure that we are delivering an equitable service.
Thank you, Clara. Steve.
Thank you. Now, second question, and again, it's completely understand. Yeah, you're taking a review on the SIL, but is there a timeline of any ideas when we'll start accepting applications? It's again, several groups have come, sort of come forward and said, oh, do we know when that's going to happen? I don't know if is there a timeline to that, or but with regards to SIL applications, yeah. So I completely understand you're taking a review on that, and but is there a timeline to that at the moment of when applications might start sort of coming in again?
That's better. We've started the process. What I think we'll need to do, though, is we'll need to look to an external agency, probably somebody away from the council that's perhaps a bit more impartial, because I think we will have our views on SIL, particularly as members. So I think the idea is we'll procure, preparing the infrastructure funding statement at the moment. But I think you'd say, Clara, we want to do that in the next few months, don't we? We want to try and bring a report back, and then start hearing those applications for SIL again.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Absolutely, we do understand the desire for us to be considering SIL applications as we move forward. So the very clear steer is to progress with a review of SIL governance, but we do want to get it right from grassroots up and make sure that there's ample time for engagement with the with ward members and through my portfolio holder. For where we are specifically right now, I'm unable to give you that specific timetable because we're at the tendering process, but more than happy to take that offline. But the very clear steer is the desire to bring forward SIL applications.
If I can just actually concur with Councillor Corney, I too have actually had some requests from local council about the SIL. Obviously, it's facilitating the neighbourhood plan because they're anticipating, obviously, development of the neighbourhood plan, so they would get additional funding. So, yes, that's obviously something to consider. Were there any other? Oh, Councillor Pickering.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to put on record, well, my thanks and congratulations to the officers for the progress made on clearing the backlog. It's quite remarkable to read in the report the progress that's been made with that. So, you know, would you pass on, you know, to the team, you know, our appreciation for that. My question is, and Councillor Sanderson touched on it just briefly, the review of unspent Section 106 funds, and whether you can just give any more detail on where we are with that, and you know, what the delays are in kind of actually letting us know what, you know, what might be available and what for.
Thank you, Marcus. As I said, we've started that process going through some of the 106 contributions related to open spaces. Helen Lack and David Rook have been really proactive on that and unravelled some possible outstanding sums. Quite a bit of it in St Neots, you'll be pleased to know. So I may have some good news for Love's Farm and Priory Park and other places. And I think that perhaps there's been a bit of an historic thing where some of the old sums haven't been cleared off the system. They have actually been used. So if we can clarify that. And equally, Claire Burton from the planning team is looking at some of the ones that relate to the NHS, for example, which are a lot more complex. So we should get an update, I think, from Helen and the team quite soon, because I know they've done a lot of work on it, and I'll certainly send that out to members if they're happy for me to do so.
Thank you. And just to confirm, the IFS is a statutory obligation to be fulfilled annually. So we will be issuing a further IFS in December of this year, which will come through this space as well. In advance of that, and absolutely recognising the questions that emerged on the back of the previous IFS, there has been a lot of work in the background with colleagues, particularly in open spaces, but as Councillor Sanderson said, with our external colleagues. And the idea being that hopefully what you will see this year is you will see that transition from last year, and between now and then, you'll have the answers to some of those more substantial questions that emerged from the back of the previous IFS, not least open space spend.
Thank you, Clara. Councillor Slade.
Yeah, thank you. Can I dip into the section on agency staffing costs? It seems to be quite a reduction in the amount that we've spent on agency staff this year. I'm assuming that's a rolling year from April. But working out the figures, that's still quite a low amount, which is great. It's great that we've reduced that, but I just want to understand why that might be the case.
Thank you. If we look back and we reflect 21-22, that was at a period when a substantial number of staff from the senior leadership within the department were themselves agency staff. So since that time, and as alluded to elsewhere in the report, obviously Julie joined us in February of 22, which was a permanent recruitment. I came into post as Chief Planning Officer on the 1st of April. But behind that was that management layer of team leaders, where a large part of the expense did sit. So inside that as well, what we have been doing is actively trying to recruit. What I will say though, just as a marker for 23-24, as it says there in brackets, to date. Now, with the best will in the world, we don't anticipate significant upturn in spend in consultancy within this financial year. But being very, very realistic, obviously, we can't predict what the market will do, what some of our officers might decide. But the point of referencing this was actually just to show within the space of a couple of years how much we have dropped down. And our absolute ambition is to steer away from use of consultants for more than one reason. It's not limited to financial. It goes to the theme of the quality of work that we put out as a department and our reputation. So we are absolutely keeping an eye on agency costs where possible. But we don't take our eye off the ball on that one.
Thank you, Clara. Councillor Well.
Thank you, Chair. A question on the local plan element, referring to section 2.25. I think the item speaks of a little bit of disappointment around the amount of feedback received from town and parish councils in this point on the on the feedback. So, is there any concern around the sort of relatively low level of feedback and how that might, are we in danger of missing any opportunities in terms of delivering local planning in the context of this disappointing feedback? Thank you.
I think you're right. I mean, I noticed my own town council hasn't fed back. I don't think St Neots Town Council did either. So that's two big parish councils in the district. I'd urge all our parish councils to contribute. It's certainly in their interest to do so. And there'll be other opportunities for them. Quite a few, I think. But we've encouraged. We've met with them. We've had events here, so they're aware of it. But I think sometimes perhaps they don't always appreciate the importance of the local plan. Did you want to add anything to that, Clara?
Thank you. And through you, Chair, I think it's absolutely building on the final point Councillor Sanderson raises there. It's how we can work with the parishes to encourage attendance. And dare I say, we absolutely welcome feedback from you as ward councillors. It's the best way to influence your parishes. Thankfully, we are at the very early stages of plan making. And again, looking at our local development strategy, which sets out that the next round of consultation will be in the spring of next year, notwithstanding any general elections. As we go into that, as we come towards that, we would absolutely welcome feedback from you as ward members as to how best to engage with and encourage your parishes to attend events. Thank you.
Any other questions? Oh, Councillor Gardner.
You don't need to say it like that. Kat. Okay. Um, just with regard to the call for sites, I know in my particular division it has set a lot of hairs running because the villages are certainly worried by certain proposed sites. Can you give those villages any sort of advice with regards to these sites that are coming forward, but they're not actually at this stage got any planning to them at all, have they? But villagers are being led to believe that perhaps they have. So what would your advice be to those villages where there are large developments that could come forward if they go through the whole planning process, and if they actually then do meet the call for sites, because we don't yet know whether it's going to be one of those sites that you would want to continue with?
Thank you. That is a question that is emerging more frequently. And just to give some assurances, the planning policy team and I have been discussing about how we can use an FAQ section of our local plans page, our local plan update page, perhaps that we can answer some of these questions. So what would also be welcomed as well is if you are getting questions from your parishes, please do submit them to us. So perhaps we can put them on the website and that learning can be shared more broadly. But simply put, the call for sites is simply that we know that as part of plan making, we will have an objective to find a quantum of housing and a quantum of land for industrial development, for economic development, I should say. So the way to go about that is clearly to see which land may be available for that, hence the call for sites. The call for sites and plan making is fundamentally different to the process of decision making a planning application. So with that in mind, at this point in time, there is no assumption that any of the land put forward, which ones will be likely to be allocated. We have to go through a very rigorous process on how we consider land, not least just considering the sustainability appraisal, looking at the evidence bases we stand up, and that's what will lead us to a framework that will inform a future plan in the fullness of time. But just again to be clear, there will be further consultation on the local plan next year around issues and options. As the plan starts to progress towards the consideration of sites themselves, that will be built into future consultation and engagement as well. And this probably brings me back to the last question around parish council engagement with plan making. If we can really encourage them to engage with our planning policy team, any questions that come to mind, we are there to support them and help them understand the plan making process. But to give the assurance for where we are now, a call for sites you're absolutely right, does not mean that the site will be allocated or will be suitable. However, if a landowner was minded to bring a site forward in advance of the local plan, they would have to do that through the planning application process. And as we know, that would be subject of a full public consultation, and that would be considered on its own merits against the prevailing development plan and any material considerations at that time.
Well, just to add to that as well, I think, Ian, if you've got anxious villages, parish councils, ask them to get in touch. And it does generate, as you say, a lot of hairs running, and rumours do spread in villages, as we know. So,
Are there any other questions? Okay, I'd like to obviously pass on my own congratulations to the team for doing an excellent job. I can see huge improvements in the last year. So well done, and particularly to Julia and the team, obviously, on enforcement. And I'm talking personally, obviously, from St Ives members. So thank you for the team. Uh, obviously, there's no major recommendations other than it be accepted and moved forward to cabinet for this paper. Okay. Item 6, place strategy. Thank you.
Whilst we're just waiting for the change in presenters, as it were, just to let you know, I'm aware it's quite warm in here this evening. I have requested perhaps that could be turned down a little bit, so I'm sort of hoping that might kick in at some point, possibly just about when we leave. But just to let you know, I am aware it is quite warm.
Good evening. I'm going to start off by saying good evening, dragons, because I'm actually going to ask you for something this evening. You see, that's got your attention, hasn't it? So we have got a report for you this evening, but actually this is an unusual report because you'll remember, because most of you were involved in the work that we did to create the place strategy. I'll just remind you that the place strategy isn't ours. It's Huntingdonshire's. And we worked very hard to be in the enable and influence space to try and facilitate the creation of a place strategy that everybody else believes they own and everybody else has written on and developed with us. So tonight's report is going to be somewhat unusual, because normally things that we bring to you are very much where we're in the do space. You know, we have ownership of quite a lot of the work, so therefore we control quite a lot of the variables. In order for the place strategy to work effectively, we really have to spend more of our time in the enable and influence space, because it's only as good as the people who come around the table, develop the place strategy, run with the place strategy, and evolve that vision into a reality that's going to take us to the next 20 to 30 years. So what you're going to hear tonight is where we've got to so far. There are going to be some things that happened a little bit quicker than we expected, some things which have been slower than we expected. And it's a very much an organic process, but there is an ask. So that's why I thought I'd be really upfront about it to start with, because that might help you think about the ask as you go through. One of our real challenges is we said we wanted this place strategy to be owned by everybody, but particularly by our communities. Now, you represent our communities, so we need you to help own it with them on their behalf. And I'm interested in whether there are things that we could do now at this juncture to involve you and all 52 members. But importantly, who else do we need to get involved who you might not see in the report so far, but we know that they're in our communities. We know that they would have an active part to play. They might have been on the journey for the beginning part. They might only be coming to us now at this stage. And this is particularly making sure we've got a broad cross-section of Huntingdonshire represented. And I'm looking specifically at Ian. I'm going to say it first, Ian. Rural as well as towns. You see, I do listen, but it's really important. And making sure that actually this is everybody's strategy. So that's the ask. Officers have prepared a presentation, and then we'll take questions. But I really would like your thoughts about how we move forward, what you might help us bring, what opportunities we might want to create at this stage. I hope that sort of sets the tone. And over to you, colleagues.
Good evening, Chair. Good evening to the panel. Just over the next few minutes, we sort of wish to provide you an update, obviously, with the Huntingdonshire Futures project. I think this is our first appearance at Overview and Scrutiny since the Council formally adopted the place strategy at the end of March. Next slide, please. Just over the next few minutes, more specifically, what we'll do is we'll revisit the place strategy and we'll just sort of revisit why this work was created in the first place. We'll talk about the Council's approach and why HDC is committed to this work. And we'll explain about how we propose Huntingdonshire Futures is delivered moving forward. And we'll reflect on what's happened so far and what we've achieved. Obviously, I think last year, as the strategy was formed and was created, we had a number of focused engagements with members. And I think tonight, in the spirit of that Councillor Convoys has outlined in her introduction, we'd like to hear from members, not only to invite, obviously, clearly your comments and your questions, but to seek any ideas and solutions that you may have in response to the information that we will present. Next slide, please. So let's just take a moment just to remind ourselves of the place strategy in Huntingdonshire Futures. Just a reminder that, of course, this is a 20 to 30 year visioning piece. It's a long-term piece of work. It's an opportunity for partners to work differently together against a backdrop of challenges that many organisations face when considering sort of funding and resource. The strategy is Huntingdonshire's strategy. It's co-designed by our businesses, our communities, and our residents, and it's a result of a raft of engagement that was undertaken in 2022 and 2023. Of course, Huntingdonshire Futures have been designed to create a brighter future for the districts, which of course is why the council has resourced this project from its inception. Now, if we look at the slide in front of you from the top right, you can see, and apologies because the print is slightly small, but you can see that what we're aiming for is the overall destination and that articulates the brighter future that we're reaching for. There are 5 journeys or areas of focus, each describing what we want Huntingdonshire to be like as a place and the common outcome that we're working towards. And you can see them there clearly on the screen. So we have pride in place, environmental innovation, inclusive economy, health embedded, and travel transformed. Each journey has 4 pathways attached to each, outlining how we may reach our desired journey. Next slide, please. And so if we just revisit one of the example pathways from the adopted strategy from March, and you can see again in the top left there is the what if statement. So each of the pathways had a what if statement. It was our statement of ambition or aspiration, if you like. We also had on each of our pathways, again, apologies, it's slightly small, but it was a movie trailer type introduction to each of the pathways. So it's in highlighted text, you can see in a world where there is a place which could become, but only if. And then each of the pathways has a guiding light, or if you like, an example of what could be achieved. This one in particular obviously focuses on how the Peak District has raised their particular identity of place through visitor economy activity. And then lastly, there are 3 example things that we could do. And I say could just simply because they're there to act as a suggestion. They're there as an icebreaker, and they're there as a starting point for the next phase of the project, which we'll explain more about as we go through the presentation. Next slide, please. And so clearly it's important that we explain what the council's role is in respect to Huntingdonshire Futures. So last year, as the strategy was formed and adopted, we convened and enabled the space. As we said before, this is the district strategy, co-created by others. It does not belong to the council. Moving forward, we must keep the recognition that the work is bigger than the council. And delivery of this work is about how we can do all more together to better benefit the businesses, the communities and the residents of Huntingdonshire. So the council, as Councillor Convoys outlined, will not lead the delivery of Huntingdonshire Futures, but we will create opportunities and the space for partners to be able to collaborate. So reflecting against our corporate plan principles, we would do less doing, but we would do lots of enabling, and we will use our influence appropriately to help advance this work as much as we possibly can. Ultimately, we wish to demonstrate how this project can inspire people, shape how organisations can work differently together to help realise the ambitions of Huntingdonshire Futures. Next slide, please. And so we turn to the process of mobilisation within our journey groups. So each of the themes will have a working group attached to them to help deliver the Huntingdonshire Futures project. We expect that, at least to start off with, that each of the journey working groups will go through a similar process as they become established. And as you can see by the slide there, each of these groups will become mobilised. There'll be some action planning as part of their work. There'll be some idea generation. They'll need to test some of those ideas out in an engagement environment, perhaps a workshop. And then we will invite them back to report their progress as part of some of the activities that we have planned to coincide with Huntingdonshire Day in 2024. And each of the groups will help shape and adopt their own terms of reference as part of the governance framework designed to ensure overall project assurance. Next slide, please. And along the way for each of the groups, there'll be some tools to help support them. So in terms of communication, we'll help support the groups to help shift that language from strategy to delivery. We'll help nurture the groups in terms of the narrative and enable them to exploit any storytelling opportunities. And then through better use of public engagement platforms. So we have a website, as you probably know, for this project. We will enable them to better use that platform. To be able to update any updates and progress along the way, and of course to be able to facilitate any engagement with residents that we may wish for any of the journey groups as we go forth. And in terms of the action planning, this will be some tapered activity. Some of it started in June of this year, of which we'll come back and we'll revisit in a few moments' time. And this will culminate in the final groups being mobilised in April of next year. And again, we'll explain a bit more of that in a moment or two. But each of these journey groups will have an external facilitator. They'll have a senior officer acting as a subject matter expert in each of those 5 areas. And the groups, of course, as we've just outlined, will already have the pathways and the guiding lights as their starter for 10. And also through the work that we undertook last year as we created the strategy, we also have a bank of some 150 contacts across 80 stakeholder organisations locally to be able to lean on to help develop this work as we move forward. And then finally, there will be a series of activities which we hope to place together for around the week commencing the 22nd of April to coincide with Huntingdonshire Day, which of course we all know is the 25th of April next year. So next slide, please. So turning to resourcing, and as you can see by the slide deck, we've got 2 groups of resources who will collaborate to help deliver Huntingdonshire Futures. The internal resourcing is largely part-time in nature. Of course, it includes our portfolio holder. We have senior officers, which we've just remarked in terms of their role as subject matter leads in each of the 5 groups. And we've retained the consultancies that we worked with last year. PRD, they have been retained to help facilitate our working groups and to establish the work and to take some of that work into some of those workshops that we've referred to. And then our other consultant, Prior and Partners, who were there very much as a key and critical part as we formed the strategy last year. We've retained them as our critical friend, almost a check and challenge on our project performance and progress as we move it through. And as we scale our working groups over the next 6 months and as we plan further activity, we've also now invested in a full-time resource for the team, a project coordinator who will enable the scaling of activities as the working groups mobilise and turn their attention to delivering Huntingdonshire Futures. But as you can see on the right-hand side, there's a selection of co-creation partners. Both the partners and the internal resources will, of course, work functionally together and with purpose. And as we go through the process of action planning and into delivery, but it will be our partners on the right and their respected journey working groups who will be working differently together to help deliver Huntingdonshire Futures. Each working group will appoint a chair taken from one of the co-creation partners, which takes us on to our progress framework for the project. Next slide, please. So the framework has a clear structure designed to create accountability for this work with periodic updates sewn in. So we have our political partner updates, such as these this evening, updates with senior officers at HDC and project boards, and then, of course, our external-facing activity, which includes formal boards with partners and, of course, our journey working groups. And as you can see from the slide so far, the information we've divulged may just help you understand the considerable work and thinking that's been needed to get the project from, if you like, a two-dimensional piece of paper to the point of mobilisation. This work took the majority of the time from the adoption of the place strategy at the end of March to the middle of June, when we undertook our very first inception meeting. And so it's the mobilisation phase, in which we will cover next. Next slide, please. So in terms of the timeline and the overview, as you know, as we've indicated, there are 5 journey working groups which need to be established. And so with your permission, I'll tackle these in reverse chronological order. So if we look at Travel Transform now, there are some outstanding pieces of work from some of the lead authorities in this space. And we would like to see some of that work played out just that little bit more before we start launching any time, effort and resource into this particular working group. And so we've earmarked Travel Transformed for a launch in around April of 2024. It'll be the same date when we hope to launch Pride of Place, although for very different reasons. We've already said that we would like some appropriate citizens' activities to occur to coincide with Huntingdonshire Day. And it's with that spirit that we'd like to launch our Pride of Place working group, to align with a moment in the calendar that allows us to reflect with the positive things in our district and how we can help focus and establish this working group. With environmental innovation and in the spirit of working differently and perhaps in a slightly smarter way, we have some strong activity already in the diary in the name of the climate conversation in November. And so it makes sense to mobilise a group of people around the environmental innovation working group as part of this activity, which then takes us on to the journey themes which we have launched. So we have health embedded and inclusive economy. Next slide, please. And so what progress have we made? And more critically, who have we engaged with the next stage of the project phase across health embedded and the inclusive economy to help us mobilise and to expand this activity? And so far, the cast that we have is the Managing Director of North Place, the Integrated Care System. We have the Head of Strategy for major projects for the North West Anglia NHS Trust. We have the CEO of the Cambridgeshire Chambers of Commerce, the Personalised Care Lead with the West Cambs Federation, the Vice Principal at Cambridge Regional College, and then we have a local serial entrepreneur who specialises in creating opportunities for young people aged 16 to 24. And we also have our local Huntingdon bid manager assisting us as well. And waiting in the wings, we have some other key and notable people, such as the CEO of Cambridgeshire Acre, and we have the anti-poverty strategic lead at Cambridgeshire County Council. And again, just to reiterate, with the goodwill and the work that was created last year, we have at our disposal 150 contacts from over 80 local stakeholder organisations, which I'm sure at some point we'll be calling upon to help us scale this activity. Next slide, please. And so with the work so far that we've been able to achieve with health embedded, now there are 3 layers to the arrow on the slide, and the bottom layer represents the internal project team and the work that we undertake to support the progress framework that we just we outlined a few moments ago. The middle layer is our political oversight and accountability in spaces such as this meeting again this evening. And then the top layer is very much our partner activity. It's our external facing work and where our working groups will help deliver Huntingdonshire Futures. Now, each of the groups so far that have been mobilised have been challenged to define a focus for themselves. So with health and with the support of our subject matter expert, they were encouraged to consider the wider determinants of health model when making their decision. And as a result, they have chosen physical activity and social isolation and loneliness. Now, if successful, the social isolation and loneliness theme has no current provision, but we have plenty of partners around the table willing to change this and willing to bring some energy, which is exactly the ambition that Huntingdonshire Futures was created to tackle. And as you can see, there's now a process to follow with both ideas. So a long list will be created, which we tested in a workshop environment or an engagement setting with a wider group of stakeholders. Some of those ideas or projects will be selected, and then this working group will progress the work into doing and into project delivery, likely to be in the early stages of 2024. Next slide, please. And it's the same principle for our inclusive economy group. So clearly, I won't explain the structure of the slide, but I will relay the discussion so far. So this group were also tasked with discovering their focus. And it's with the help of the subject matter lead in this space that they asked themselves what their definition was of an inclusive economy. So reflecting some of the pathways and the discussions that they had, they decided that there was a missing provision for social connection to opportunities. Let me give you a live example that was used in one of the meetings. So there is a program which has been launched by a well-respected digital and tech membership group called Cambridge Wireless, and it's called CW Texters. Now, the program supports 16 to 22-year-olds with the opportunities to advance their own digital skills, and it could be in the space of coding, artificial intelligence, sustainability, or 5G. But few people know that these kind of opportunities exist. And within a 12 to 18-month period that this program had been up and running, only a handful of young people had genuinely benefited from the CW Texters program. So providing social connection is seen as a huge opportunity to support as we create that inclusive economy of tomorrow. And this again is a unique space where there is no current provision. So as we've outlined earlier, the same process will follow. Again, a long list will be created, which will be tested in an engagement environment with a wider group of stakeholders. Some ideas or projects will be selected, and of course, then the working group will progress into doing it again, expected to be sometime early next year. Next slide, please. Okay, so what have we learned so far? Well, according to our external consultants, we are apparently one of the very few councils in the UK who are taking an adopted place strategy into a delivery phase. And we're being told that our approach is quite unique, quite bold, and quite innovative. But we must clearly continue to listen and look for examples where best practice can be used. There may be opportunities as well away from delivery, but we must recognise that this work is not without risk. Do we want these groups to purely focus on delivery, or could they also act as challenge groups to speak as experts about issues around issues, policies, or projects that could affect Huntingdonshire in the future? Of course, bearing in mind that our core objective here is to ensure that our partners work differently together and in a smarter way to benefit Huntingdonshire. We've been given international examples where this type of work has happened previously, and the delivery and the benefits of the firm foundations and the correct preparation may explain why perhaps to date this work's just taken slightly longer than originally anticipated, but that investment in time and building the foundations is well worthwhile. And of course, we must check ourselves, and remember that we're only a few months in to what we're trying to do in terms of delivering a long-term 20 to 30-year visioning plan. And there are continuous shifting requirements to the project. As Councillor Comboy has already outlined, this work is very much organic in nature. And our focus must be to support, enable, and influence each of the working groups to deliver and to do. Next slide, please. And so moving forward, how can we ensure the successful delivery of Huntingdonshire Futures? We need to understand that the funding provision is unlikely to change in the short term, and so we all have a collective responsibility to ensure that this project is delivered successfully. And we have to acknowledge that a number of organisations have already committed some very valuable and senior resources onto this work. That should not be underestimated. We've touched on funding. We may need a more agile model moving forward, whether that be a co-funding model that we try to adopt with partners in the future. We may also need to keep an eye out for external funding to help and to look for opportunities to accelerate delivery. But not only must we encourage our partners to work together differently, but we must encourage them to take the future thinking in the original strategy document and help to try and embed that into everyday working practices. This was a comment that was made in one of our earlier steering groups, and I think that typifies the spirit and goodwill that our partners bring to the table. But then just some final thoughts on this work. So Huntingdonshire moving forward will have, at the moment, according to forecasts, an ageing and gradually shrinking workforce. Working people are a valuable asset to their organisations as they're needed to be kept fit, healthy, and of course productive. So how might our private sector and our key employers contribute to the future of this work to help themselves? And as we've already seen and understood, we already have, in the short time of working, uncovered areas that lack provision, but have been brought to the table with a level of ambition and desire to make positive change by our partners. How exciting could this work be if we were to uncover more opportunities across more work streams as we scale up this activity? And of course, all of the people and organisations here have something to win or to lose from this project. And it's incumbent on us all, including our members, to play our part to help deliver that brighter future for Huntingdonshire that we're striving from this work. Next slide, please. And so just to summarise over the last few minutes, we've been able to illustrate a full mobilisation plan which has been devised across all journeys. We've attracted some influential people from a varied amount of organisations at an early stage, and this work has already identified some unique propositions which could add significant value to the district across both journeys. But of course, it's still early stages, and depending on resources and funding, if more of that comes along, we should be able to accelerate our delivery. But we'd like to understand, I think, at this point from our members, how they can assist, as Councillor Conboy's outlined, with further engagement and with community advocacy within our wards. Next slide, please. And so it's now just to hand back to the chair and just to take any comments, questions, suggestions, or ideas, please, from the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. That was a very informative presentation. Thank you. I assume we're going to get copies of that, are we? Yeah, thank you. First of all, obviously I read the update and I was really pleased to hear you've actually got some named individuals who are actually going to be taking this forward and actually in specific posts, because that was something that I picked up. At this point, I'd like to open it to the floor for questions. Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Chair. I'm interested to know what happens if we start down the route and you get to a point where each of the working groups are looking at the different pathways that have been agreed. And it comes to a point where they think, actually, this isn't the right pathway, and there could be a different pathway that might be a better pathway to take. What sort of level does that decision to amend those pathways get taken, and how far up the chain does it come for approval?
So that's a brilliant question, because the answer is we don't entirely know, because it's organic as we go. I think there's enough scope within the pathways that actually they can flex and adjust. But we've also got to be agile enough to the fact that the world around us is shifting constantly. You know, there've been some quite big announcements in the last couple of days and some today. There will inevitably be some other things that will emerge that none of us have quite foreseen. And one of the real challenges is, how do you get a system to be agile enough? And it's one of the things that we really genuinely struggle in public services. The commercial world is often more agile. So how do we make sure that we are listening and bringing that forward? And I think the answer is, if it suddenly looks like we've got to do a major rethink, it will be coming back here. If it looks like it's a minor adjustment, we'll still be communicating that with you. But actually that effectively we're still on that journey and we're broadly on track. But I think actually we could find that something emerges that means actually it is entirely appropriate and prudent to say, actually, something's emerging over there. You heard, for example, about the transport one. Now, actually, there's an awful lot of work that's been happening around transport through the Combined Authority, for example, and East West Rail. And there's some welcome announcements potentially today for us and for our area. And again, it's that's why that timeliness was appropriate, to sort of say, well, actually, let some of that unfold first and then let's drop into that landscape and work with partners. So the answer is it will come back if it's a major departure. Apart from anything else, because you may have lots of things that you then want to contribute and say, if it's going to look like this, what we'd be interested in is seeing this. And actually, we've got some other partners that would be brilliant for this part of the journey if we're going to change it. But even if it doesn't change as a pathway, it'll need to evolve. It's a 20 to 30 year vision. It's going to change in 18 months. It's going to change in 5 years. And so it's going to have to evolve over time anyway. But does that give you the assurance? The answer is it's not going to go wildly off piste without you knowing about it. But actually, because it belongs to everybody else, if it does evolve, it'll be because those people who are part of those conversations genuinely think that that's the best advice that they want to give at that stage, given the intelligence they have about what's happening in those sectors and the things that we might harness around us.
Councillor Carroll.
Thank you. Can the journey steering groups have increased core membership at all, specifically making the inclusive economy one more district-wide, because it is very Huntingdon and St Neots based at the moment?
I think we recognise that that particular group does need expanding. I think what has been really encouraging is actually the appointment of Charlotte Horriban, who's the Chief Executive of the Cambridgeshire Chambers of Commerce, to chair that group. And I think one of the tasks that Charlotte will take on is actually the expansion of that group in reaction to the work that they would like to undertake. So we'll be very much looking for who do we actually need in that group to be really effective, to be able to roll out those first interventions that we hint at next year.
And if I may, I very cheekily said to Councillor Gardner, but it's that inclusivity. It's the whole of our district. It's different size settlements. It's different types of settlements. It's reflecting different communities. It's making sure that we're pulling that in. We've run with those people who've self-identified and said, I'm up for that. We know that we've got a contact list of other people who said, I'm interested, but haven't necessarily stepped into that space. The answer is, who else needs to be on the list? Perhaps not for tonight, because you might surprise those that are dialing in that you've suddenly volunteered them for something without us discussing it with them first. But that's the engagement we'd like from you, please. 52 of you know your communities really, really well. Who should we be talking to? Who's not on that list? How do we make it so that we've got the right connections? And if they're not on the steering group, how do we still engage with them? Because actually there are lots of people who we could make really valuable contributions. Sorry, because I may have inadvertently stolen somebody's question.
I just want to say, I've got a couple of ideas that I can put forward as well afterwards.
You are my favourite person. Please, everybody else, lots of ideas. Please make sure that we get that information.
Councillor Gardner.
Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you very much. I'm glad to hear the administration is listening to what I have to say. That does please me greatly. With regard to the rural areas, as you know, I am HD's representative at Kimbolton School. Now, Kimbolton School does a lot of work with the local parish councils, trying to get people more active and everything else. So I think, I'm not trying to, to say to get them involved, but I think somewhere like that, we should be asking a major employer in this district if they can assist with regard to health matters, because we get a lot of usage of the school swimming pool by local residents across the district. And we're going to get even more if Saltrey closes. So, these are the sort of things, but we need to be engaging with those sort of employers that can provide that information. Whereas, as Councillor Howe quite rightly said, it looked to me that everybody was Cambridge or Huntingdon based. And we really, if we're going to get it down to making sure that everybody is engaged, we need to engage with the local community, and that whether it be in the rural areas or in the towns. As I say, I am HDC's representative at Kimbolton School, so I'm more than happy to assist in that way going forward.
If I could add as well, I think we've started the ball rolling, and we've started with people that volunteered to start those journeys off. So they're the courageous ones that have put, as I say, skin in the game. What's been really encouraging is that they have self-reflected and recognized that they aren't representative. And the trick that we needed to pull off was for the volunteers that started to take the lead to recognise that they're the people to invite the others in, not necessarily the council, because we want to make sure that it's truly co-created. And so the independent chairs then have that action with the existing groups to send out those invitations, because it can't always be us as representative of the council trying to drag people into the table. So what's really encouraging is that started, but absolutely we're here today to say if there are opportunities and tricks that you know that we can play with your local knowledge and your colleagues' local knowledge, we need to do that as well and put those chairs in that position to be able to follow that up. So it's really encouraging that that has started to happen, but we want to accelerate it. That's why we've invested in the resource now of somebody dedicated to follow up, to have those conversations with people and invest that time to draw more people into that. So thank you very much for those points. And if there are any that occur now or later, Paul and I really want those.
Well, Councillor Conboy knows the other one I was thinking of, and I'm sure she will put that one forward, because I do think that is a major employer and what have you across the district. So I do think they should be involved going forward.
If I may, Chair, thank you very much, Councillor Gardner. And part of the challenge is making those introductions. So you've got a personal relationship with that particular employer. That's really important because our chairs may not necessarily know them. So those kind of personal introductions really help. And lots of you will have other contacts, or you will gradually in time fall over contacts that you kind of think, that's somebody we ought to make sure that introduction gets made. So please, that's exactly the kind of contacts we want over time. But we do want to make sure that we're not inadvertently leading the group, but actually they would welcome those contacts. So any that you can give us, or you think there are people that we ought to be making overtures to. And equally, if we're not quite sure how to engage, so a school is a very particular example. It's really hard to get people who are in education to engage during a school day because they're normally really quite busy running the establishment that they're in. It's the same for businesses, but the dynamics are sometimes different. So again, understanding how we can make that introduction, how we might engage in a way that is inclusive of those people, for example, from that sector, it's really important for us to understand, and you will probably have insights, all of you as councillors, to different people and different sectors that we may not necessarily have that insight and those contacts.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Slade.
Yeah, thank you. So you mentioned a project coordinator. I'm just wondering who that is. My other question is about where these meetings are held. It'd be quite nice for the district council to extend, obviously, use of our meeting rooms for those meetings to be held. Otherwise, these organisations will incur, obviously, costs for renting rooms.
Okay, so no, thank you for that, Councillor Slade. So, in terms of the project coordinator, we advertised that role about a month ago. Had a really overwhelming response. It was really pleasing. We interviewed some really high caliber candidates, and we're really pleased that we have someone joining the team the first week of November. So we'll probably have more that we can say once that person is bedded into the team and socialised with the project. In terms of where the meetings are taking place, I think we're trying to we're trying to utilise the groups themselves. I think again, just leading from Neil's point, rather than us leading where the meetings should be and where they should go. Actually, the membership themselves of each of the working groups, they have access to meeting facilities and they have the ability to take those meetings around. But of course, we also need to recognise the fact that the rural and the towns issue. There will be opportunities, for example, certainly with the transport. It was very much our intention to go and take that to areas like Ramsey. The environmental innovation, could we go out to Gratham? So we are very much thinking quite agile in terms of where the meetings can take place, where will they chime with the themes, where will they work best. But certainly, again, I think that the trick is probably allowing the working groups themselves to take that lead and to steer that process moving forward.
Thank you, Paul. Are there any other questions? Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Chair. With regard to these meetings, will members be able to sit in and listen? Because that may well make member engagement much better if they can hear what's going on.
Thank you. I think it's a very interesting thought, and I think that's something we'll ask all of officers to mull over with the groups. I'll be honest, I'm desperate to go and sit in on some Councillor Gardner, but I'm also conscious that I will not necessarily be a permanent fixture. So I actually want them to gel as a group and to have ownership rather than feeling that I'm coming to watch them. But like you, it's that I'm desperate to go and see, because then I think I would be able to contribute more. So I think that's something we'll put back to the groups to think about how they might engage with us. And the other thing is, if, for example, we did a member workshop before, I seem to remember quite a lot of people in this chamber waving flip charts and bits of sticky notes and pens and getting all exercised in a really good way about, and what if, and we could, and wouldn't it be good if? And I'm wondering whether there might also be a bit of an opportunity to do some of that around putting our collective thoughts back together again around who else could we link in, how's this developing? Because I think that would potentially be really worthwhile, because again, the thinking has moved in those groups, and taking Councillor Jennings' point, actually the world keeps shifting. So all the things we got excited about actually are all the things that we would put on sticky notes tomorrow. They're still the same things, or has it evolved again? So again, if there is a general will, I think that might be something again we'd explore as a way of engaging not only you, but actually the wider member group.
Neil, sorry.
There we go. I was just going to add, the meetings at the moment have very much been the steering groups. So the people that we've been co-designing the next phase with. So the idea of a broader workshop to test ideas out. So as a matter of course, those broader workshops, we would invite members broadly to those anyway, the very broad workshops. So the focus at the moment has been with the smaller group of people to make sure that that is inclusive, that we have got those different sectors involved. So we're drawing businesses in, we're drawing communities in. And so that's where these contacts and things would be really, really important. But those broader workshops that we're planning as well at the moment, they would have a broader invitation. The difference between the place strategy, of course, will be that these will be focused on a particular journey now, rather than the very expansive of all the journeys all at once. So I think with that focus, we need to make sure that we have that open member invitation to that, which is a given.
If I'd like to comment in support of Councillor Gardner, actually, because I think that, as you've identified, this is actually an organic process. So actually, it's going to develop, it's going to change. So it's going to be incredibly difficult to identify what your success factors are, because they're going to be a constant moving target. So it would be helpful to actually keep members very involved in where that's going, because it'd be difficult to keep a handle otherwise. But if there are no other questions, I'd like to move us on to the next item. And thanks for all the comments that have been provided so far. Item 7. Thank you, Paul, Neil, thanks, Sarah. Item 7, Market Town. Apologies for the heat. Apologies.
Thank you, Chair and panel. You've got us for two papers, but they're intimately related. The first of which is in public session, and the second is private. There's a lot of discussion we'd like to have on the second piece, so I'm going to break a habit, and particularly given the time we're at tonight, not quite as late as I feared, given how much of the agenda we've been through already. I'm not going to walk you through the entire paper in detail, because you'll have read it, and by now you'll be quite familiar with the underlying projects that we're updating you on. But the headlines are, firstly, that we've appointed Eurovia as contractors on the town centre works, and those are due to commence later this month. Works on the Market Square itself will be from January, so as to minimise disruption to the very important Christmas lights switch on and festive activities in St Neots, but the related highways works start sooner. That's obviously a major milestone in the project, and as we all know, this is not a project we dreamt up since we took over as an administration 18 months ago. It's very much a shared milestone for the council across the chamber, and that's the spirit in which we're proceeding with the projects. Crucially, and I think pretty extraordinarily, given our fears that we discussed at length last year especially, we are broadly in line with expected costs on this element of the works. That bit has not happened by accident or by luck. It's happened thanks to the hard work of our officer team in interrogating everything, working closely with potential contractors during the finalisation of the designs, testing as we went along. So I want to commend them for that formally. But we look forward to commending them even more once the designs have become real in practice and getting through the inevitable bumps on the road through the construction phase, management of some of which potential bumps are discussed in the paper. The other key headline is around the Priory Centre. So our contractor AOC have pulled together a team to help us move forward all the way to construction phase in that project element as well. And we've established a building development group to help plug into the project town councillors, district councillors, staff who work in the building, and help us engage with other centre users and stakeholders as well. And again, I'd like to extend my thanks across the chamber for assisting with that. Councillor Jennings as a St Neots ward member and Councillor Slade in his town capacity are both on that with myself and colleagues. And finally, in terms of the key updates in the paper, the Shopfront grant scheme in Huntingdon and St Ives has started delivering its first grants. We talked previously about why its scope is Huntingdon and St Ives only. And we are progressing with digital wayfinding. Following discussions last quarter's update, we did opt to proceed with that with the authority that you previously delegated to us. But I'm conscious I flagged that to you, I think, informally at a previous meeting. I don't think I wrote to confirm it formally. So my apologies for that. No discourtesy was intended to you as a panel, but this report updates you of that formally as well. We are at this moment procuring a contractor to help us work with the town councils to deliver on the screens. There is one erratum to flag to you in the report, a stray paragraph reference. So 4.7 points you to 4.1 for more information about the digital screens. It, of course, means 6.1. Unless there is anything Pam wished to add at this point, she's shaking her head. Chair, I'd open to you and the panel for comments and questions as ever.
Thank you. Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, if I could just put on record my thanks for the invite to be on the Building Development Group. I think I found it in the first session very useful that we could go in a lot more granular detail than we could ever get to in this panel. So my question is actually about the digital wayfaring. In the last overview or in the last update that you brought to this panel, we were approaching, I believe it was Haverhill and Ely, who were two users of such digital wayfaring systems, to get feedback from those. And at the last panel, we hadn't had any. Have we had any feedback on their experiences to date?
So we certainly have had discussions with them, but unless there's anything Pam's able to say offhand, I think rather than riff on that, I'd suggest that we pick it up depending on the urgency of your interest with the next quarterly report. When we've got a contractor identified, we'll then be able to compare that against specifically what's proposed here as well with learning. So we can do it like that. But if there's a wish for information sooner, I'm sure we can ask officers to assist with that.
Any other? Sorry. Councillor Pickering.
Thank you, Chair. My question is about the Priory Centre, and I'd like to ask if it's at all realistic that the Future High Streets Fund money will be spent by March 24, given that there doesn't even now seem to be a detailed plan for how the money is going to be used.
So we use the label of the Future High Streets projects for all of these works, but of course the Future High Streets have supplied a minority, albeit a very large, significant, useful, generous minority of the funding for the scheme. The Future High Streets element is part of the monies that we've earmarked for the Priory Centre. So as the report discusses, we're looking at phasing that so that we're using money with sooner deadlines first as part of a longer programme of works. It's certainly tight, but it is realistic. It's what we're working to. We're working with contractors who are specialists in sort of community building design to assist us with that as well. AAC, who I found very impressive as well in the building development group when we met. So it's tight, and we expect our feet to be held to the fire on it quite rightly by this panel. But as I say, we do think we can manage that. Pam may wish to add at this point.
Thank you, Councillor Wakeford. All I would add to that is that I think we've always been very mindful of this project and the sort of the timings. And as Councillor Wakeford is saying, we are looking at the sort of the structure of the funding so that we are using that ends sooner, quicker. What we are also doing is liaising, as we always do on a monthly basis, with DLUC. To see whether there is any sort of wriggle on that time scale, and also whether we can look at a commitment to spend as part of the contract. So that's obviously, even if we're in contract with someone, that obviously provides a commitment to sort of spend that money, which might then fall over into the next financial year. But the fact that there is a commitment is something that they have indicated would be something that they would agree to. So we have that regular ongoing relationship with DLUC, and I think it's been very clear for a very long time that they are very willing to sort of work with us to achieve the aims of the sort of the overarching future high street ambitions for St Neots. So that's something that we'll continue to do.
Councillor Corn.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sure we'd be disappointed if we didn't ask a question, um, predominantly about Ramsey as well. But I did actually have two questions and a couple of comments I'd like to add. But first question has kind of been, I was asking about the digital boards, but I think we've covered that off, which is fine. Secondly, with regards to Ramsey, I'm just trying to find now what paragraph we were in, but it was the parking survey. Do we have any idea when those results will be coming through? Because I know, obviously, part of my comment, which I'll come on to in a moment, is about the public realm work, which is obviously there's a loss of the parking spaces. So I know it's quite an important piece of work. So there's been comment on it, and it kind of does read in a little bit of a negative way, but there's not results there to make it negative, if that makes sense. So I don't know if you've got any, if you know when that's coming through to start with.
Thank you, Councillor Corney. In the report, which might not have been hugely clear, but 8.2, 8.3 of the report, we have had the outcome of the car parking capacity study. And that has given us some information about car parking and the need in Ramsey. There is spare capacity, but one of the things, and I think we've spoken before about better use of the available sort of land in and around the car park and sort of available sort of land around. So that is something that we would look to do as part of any sort of initiative, and as sort of the produce hub project evolves, that would be something that we would look to improve. But that has come out and that has been shared with the town council. Apologies if that hasn't been sort of disseminated down, but quite happy to share that more widely with yourselves and the other ward councillors for Ramsey, just to pick that up if that hasn't been shared more widely.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think the important thing is that it's done, and as long as it doesn't come across in a negative way, that's going to impact, the greater picture, if you like, the bigger plan. But yeah, so the comment really was just wanted to pick up on both yourself, Pam, and Sam Colbeck as well. I think just getting nothing but good feedback back through the town council, apart from parking survey results. But other than that, their feedback, which is really welcome. But it's just to put on record, and I know we've spoke about it a lot in the past, and I completely appreciate that the hub, the funding for the hub plays a big part in the public realm work as well. But ultimately, the parish, the town council, it's a public realm work. It's great to see it happening instantly. It's what Ramsey wants as well, and so it's but I know Sam's working really hard on that to try and make that work. So I just wanted to make that comment as well. So yeah, thank you.
Just on that subject, if I may, we would have issued requests, steer instruction to officers around engagement with town councils as fully as possible. But frankly, they don't need that, because there is no way to do these sorts of projects other than through close engagement. The team that we've built and Pam has built for us over the past 18 months has expertise in that is hugely valuable to us, both for Ramsey and you've name checked a couple of the team. Let me name check Charlie as well on the St Neots projects. So I'm really delighted to hear that feedback, and as I say, it's a reflection of the expertise and professionalism of the officers that we're lucky to have on this.
Thank you, Sam. Councillor.
Sorry, and just to come back on a more wider point, I guess, in relation to that sort of engagement, one of the things that we're looking to do is diarise some sort of drop-in events for ward councillors and the town councillors. It's something that we trialled and we've sort of seen differing success, but I think the team feel that it would be really helpful just to not necessarily have an agenda, but just to be able to sort of put something in the diary on Teams, every sort of month or so that members and sort of ward councillors, town councillors can actually drop in if there's anything that they want to talk about the Market Towns programme that a resident has mentioned, or they querying, or they've lost track of what the current status is of a project. So that's something that's going to be diarised sort of in the next sort of couple of weeks, so that we have a rolling programme of that, because we're conscious that as some of these schemes now come to actual development, it's really important that we keep local members aware of what's happening.
Thank you, Pam. As a councillor of a market town, I very much appreciate that. Councillor Slade.
Thank you. I've got a few things as expected, but firstly, an observation that I'm really excited about. Obviously, the St Neots part of this, because I've been close to this for many years, so it's exciting to see kind of actually stuff happening on the ground now. So I've been kind of speaking to constituents and residents as much as possible, telling them the good stuff that's coming. So that's great. So continue the good work. The comms plan that's mentioned in the report, I think it's useful to kind of push forward with that, because I think it's important that we get residents on side, especially with things like trees, just to make sure that they know why they're coming down, and try and do our comms as much as we can, both online and physically. I've had comments kind of from our town council that Sam and Charlie are kind of are a bit inundated with the amount of communication they're getting. So I'm wondering whether there's anything that can be done that will assist that process of making sure that as contractors and kind of different parties get involved, that there's not a bottleneck with just two officers. So again, if you can comment on that. And then I've got one observation in the report, which is related to the legacy funding, which talks about the co-retail space. So I'd just like to know who's taking that forward. So it mentions a community interest company that's taking that forward. So yes, thank you.
Shall I start at the end and then pass to Pam to go backwards? So and apologies for the phrasing if that's ambiguous. So we're not seeking to be deliberately secretive about a community interest company. A community interest company would be formed for the purpose by Shift Momentum, who we're working with. So the vehicle for delivering this wouldn't be technically Shift. It would be a CIC whose name hasn't been confirmed yet. So thanks for the opportunity of clarifying that. I might turn to Pam on the earlier points, if I may.
So to pick up the sort of the St Neots project, obviously the delivery of the project, we do have the county council as our project managers, who will be on the ground with a dedicated project manager delivering the project on our behalf, with Charlie from obviously our side overseeing that. Sam Caldbeck, obviously as his line manager, is supporting Charlie in that regard. I think it's like anything, you know, this project is of a scale that we need to sort of be a bit agile in our approach, and if needed, we will obviously look to other team members to support the delivery. We have a project support officer, plus we also have another project manager within the team that may or may not be able to dip in and out as and when required. But we are paying the county council a considerable fee to support this project, and we would expect their dedicated project manager and their managers to support this on the ground as well. So I think at this point in time, we don't foresee there being a problem, but I'm always up for discussion about how we can better communicate with the town council and local ward members as we sort of move into the delivery phase of this project. So would welcome, you know, some discussion on that. That would be something that I'd be open to. Apologies, Councillor Slade, I'm not sure the first question, so if you could just remind me. Oh, sorry.
It's all right. First question was really my excitement about the whole project. But following up on the issue of the CIC. So you mentioned that it's Shift Momentum, which so they're one of the leads on one of our previous items. So they're leading on the inclusive economy journey steering group. I mean, is there a conflict of interest? Are we concerned about that?
The straight answer is no, that we're not concerned, but very happy if you wish to pick something up for us to follow up more fully with you offline. I don't wish that to sound flippant, but the straight answer is no, unless Pam wishes to add anything.
I'm happy to just provide some further information, just to say that this organisation would be required to sign up to the grant funding agreements that we have had to sign up to in relation to the combined authority. So they would have the same sort of rigour and approach in relation to their activity as we would have had if we were directly delivering this project. We haven't yet got off the ground. I don't think the company has yet been incorporated, but they expect to do that, you know, in the next few weeks. They are very eager to get something off the ground in time for Christmas. So I think we will be able to provide further updates as soon as we're able to. But that's sort of the timeline that they are aiming to work for on this.
Councillor Gardner.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, under 2.5, I wonder if you can just give us a bit more detail with regard to the project communication plan, because we've all seen what's happened in other authorities where we've taken down trees, and we don't need just to tell the people of St Neots that we're taking down trees. We need to tell the wider area, because you know they could be just as upset as residents of St Neots. So I do think would like to know how we're looking to engage with the general public and get the message out why the trees are coming down and everything else. Oh, it's stated in here, that's fine, but we need to get that message across to the general public before they start chaining themselves to trees.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. So, as you say, colleagues will have read what's in the paper, but for benefit of the masses, I'm sure, who are watching us online, as per usual, let me take that as an opportunity just to underline that there is no need for people to be concerned about the trees being taken down. Quite the reverse, they were incorrectly planted. the county council will be pulling them down anyway. And as the second half of 2.5 reminds colleagues, as we've touched on previously, the scheme is in fact going to result in the planting of a greater number, a wider variety of trees that have been picked for biodiversity value. Considerations around quality of air impact and so on, and their improvement of air quality. They're already at semi-mature stage, so we're not planting tiny little saplings that will take a significant time to be visible. And we're going to combine them with the biodiverse ground level planters as well. So there is a lot that is to be welcomed. But you make a good point that being right and having facts doesn't help us to address concerns. But I think it is not merely a message as to the fact that as part of this project trees are coming down. I think we're trying to communicate about the project as a whole, as part of the good news of what's happening. We've got detailed FAQs already on our website. As this item discusses, we've got a communications plan to help us move forward with that. Pam may wish to add something, but as we talked about before, we hear the concern. We appreciate it, particularly with reference to the examples that you've alluded to. But the facts are quite different here.
Sorry, Chair, is it all right? Yes, really what I want to know is, I agree with everything you've said, but how are you going to communicate that, what you've told me, to the residents of St Neots and the surrounding area so they know why those activities are occurring? That's what I want to know, is how are you going to do it so that we don't get the problems that occurred in another authority?
The short answer is that we do it through all the communications channels that we've got, as we've been doing. This has been in the public domain for a significant period of time. We are making reference to the replacement of trees in comms that you all have seen already, that we've put out through our channels with partners, with the town council, and so on. We have a comms team, a crack comms team here in HDC, who are assisting us with that as best that we can. Whether Pam has any more detail she's able to add on the specifics of that without Michael, our head of comms, here with us, I don't know. But we hear the concern, and we hope you can be reassured, Councillor Gardner.
All I would add to that is that obviously we do have regular communication on the Market Towns programme, and as we move through to the delivery of this project, we're aiming to sort of increase that level of engagement with our regular newsletter, and would address that. But we have consciously looked at the project as part of the current trees are a health and safety issue. They have been identified for a number of years that they needed to be removed. It obviously, as soon as this project was identified, it was deemed sensible by the county council to wait until, obviously, as it's a public highway, it's county council owned trees. It was felt sensible to wait until this project would then facilitate the removal of the 9 trees and the replacement by 14 with the other added benefits that Councillor Wakeford has just mentioned. We also will be intending, as part of the hoarding to the site, looking at sort of like a history of the market square, sort of from its, from the earliest photos that we've been able to obtain. So there's a bit of a timeline and some messaging on that hoarding about what we're trying to achieve from the wider scheme, but also some of the messaging about the tree removal and the replacement, which we're looking to coincide.
Thank you. My own question is obviously, as ever, is about the risks, and actually particularly inflation, albeit that it's coming down. How is the budget holding up on that, Pam?
So as I touched on with respect to the town centre works that we've now locked in arrangements with our contractor to do the construction. Finance has come in remarkably well relative to the concerns that we were talking about with rocket inflation last year. Inflation is still extremely high. Inflation is, as some around the table will know better than me, professionally, is inflation in construction is beyond even in the wider economy. So that is a live and carefully managed element of risk. I touched on some of the steps that we'd been undertaking, for example, with respect to the town centre works. In my introduction, there's a wider the risk governance framework that we've touched on in the paper. Pam may wish to offer some further reassurance about as well. But you're absolutely right to raise the question. But I'm extremely comfortable with the robustness of what we've built with respect to governance and risk management over the past 18 months.
And just to add, Chair, I think what we were looking at when we actually went out to tender, obviously you will recall that we took a little bit longer to look at the project, and we had a detailed sort of quantity surveyor looking at the project, so that we literally got down to sort of numbering flagstones and curbstones and things like that, so that we actually knew that we would go out to tender with a deliverable scheme. I think that we were very conscious that we didn't want to have tenders come back that were very way off what we were hoping to in relation to the budget. Obviously, within the budget, we've built in all along a risk and optimism bias, which is, quite clearly identified within the budget for the project. The projects has come in slightly under the budget that we had anticipated for the construction element. Obviously, the project management element and others are a standard fee, so that was controlled, but the construction costs have come in under the budget that we'd set. But obviously, of a project of this scale, we are expecting, unforeseens, as would always be expected of a project of this scale in the ground. So that risk budget and the optimism bias budget, which is reasonably considerable, gives us that additional buffer for the Market Square project. In relation to the Priory Centre, again, we've looked at very, very clearly when we appointed AOC to deliver that project, we wanted it to be deliverable. So we are looking at a sort of sliding scale of sort of things that we can actually do in that building, so that we know that we've got an achievable deliverable project within a reasonable time scale to fit the financial funding requirements. We also, as part of our governance of the Market Towns programme, not only are we obviously coming here on a quarterly basis to provide regular updates for members, but we do have a monthly programme board that the Section 151 officer attends and is currently chairing in lieu of the Corporate Director of Place role. And as well as that, we also do have to do regular returns to DLUC and also have regular engagement with our other funders, including highways and combined authority. So, the projects are regularly looked at, the risk and sort of governance is regularly checked, and obviously, as Councillor Wakeford has said, is in a much healthier position sort of over the last 18 months than it was earlier.
That's good to hear. Actually, it's really good to hear. Councillor Pickering.
Thank you. I'd like to touch on a slightly different part of the report, which is the Smarter Towns initiative. So lots of really interesting, data to be gathered on things like flood warnings and car parking, car park usage and so on. But I was particularly interested in 7.4, which refers to sensors in local housing association properties. That just seemed to be a bit of an outlier. So all the other data is very useful, kind of public interest data, which you could see being useful in the public domain. But obviously putting sensors into essentially private home seems to be quite a different use. And I'm wondering firstly about whether HDC should be funding you know um, work in housing association properties, but also how are we going to use that data? What are we going to do if we find actually somebody's house is too cold or too damp? What will we do with that information? How will we respond to it?
Um, Thank you for the question. Our strategic housing work is another part of my portfolio, and even more conveniently, strategic housing is another part of Pam's role as well. So why don't I turn to her to speak to that?
I think, as Councillor Wakeford has said, I think like a lot of things, when we were having discussions about the Smarter Towns project and we understood the sort of breadth of opportunity, we did speak across the organisation as to other areas where some of these sensors could prove helpful from a delivery perspective. And one of our sort of our colleagues in the environmental health team identified obviously the need for support in relation to damp and mould in the private rented sector, but also in the social housing sector. So one of the things that we're looking at doing is we have a housing association forum identified for the beginning of November. And we're aiming to sort of canvass opinion of housing associations as to whether they feel that this would be a useful tool, with the potential of them purchasing the sensors rather than us just giving them as a sort of a free service, for them to be able to monitor damp and mould, for example, in their properties. But also from our environmental health team's perspective, obviously quite a lot of the challenge is about whether someone is actually experiencing damp and mould, using that as an example rather than it being a condensation issue or something else. And so it may well be quite a useful tool from a complaint perspective to sort of then be able to use evidence to sort of use with discussions with landlords, to ask them to actually remedy some problems. So it's something that we're exploring. We haven't yet made any sort of firm decision on it, but it just shows the depth and the breadth of options that are available now that the kits are in, to the main market towns.
So just to be clear, at this stage, we're not actually funding those sensors. We'd be asking the housing associations to fund those. And is this something we're going to do on scale, or is it something that you'd be sort of targeting specific properties that have known issues, or what's the kind of thinking behind? Because ideally you'd want these sensors in every house to make it worthwhile, but presumably that's completely out of the question at this stage.
I think we don't yet have that outcome. I think we're looking really very much to sort of see what our housing association partners see as the potential benefits for that and be led by them. I do think there is an element that we could finance some of it ourselves, especially for our private sector housing activity, where we're trying to evidence and support residents who are experiencing damp and mould in the private sector, to sort of argue the point to their landlords that they need remedial works to their property. But I think very much we're open to the suggestion to our housing association partners to see whether they feel that they could make use of them as a really good tool to make sure that they're managing and maintaining their properties efficiently. So at this moment in time, no decision has been made, but we would look at the cost being covered by housing associations if they were to take up this initiative.
Are there any other questions? Oh, Councillor Slade.
Thank you. Can I ask about the shopfront scheme? You knew I was going to ask this. I've had there's been quite a lot of negative press in St Neots about this, and I've had conversations with business owners who feel quite disgruntled in that St Neots weren't included on the scheme. So I'd like to kind of understand and have an answer for them, a definitive answer. Thank you.
I have to declare an interest. St Ives got some and we've actually delivered some, but I'll give that to Sam to answer.
So, quite simply, there was money left earmarked for Huntingdon and St Ives. as part of the accelerated projects element of the Market Towns programme that was, as it were, their shares that had not been spent on them in the way that money had been in Ramsey, which of course we've supplemented with the million plus funding stream that we touched on earlier in discussion with Councillor Corney. And then, of course, St Neots is benefiting from a huge investment, including from this council through SOL, as well as from other funding sources that we've pulled together. So, as it were, there was money for Huntingdon and St Ives left over, which we've identified useful ways of spending. That said, through the pot of money that once upon a time was envisaged to explore a potential bid in St Neots, there was scope potentially through separate funding to the accelerated projects funding to provide this in St Neots, but the feedback from St Neots stakeholders was to prioritise otherwise, which is what we've done. Pam may or may not wish to add to that further, but very happy to assist with communications to local residents to that effect, and we sought to clarify that in a couple of ways thus far. But yeah, fundamentally, St Neots and St Ives. Let me start that sentence again. So I'm not confusing my market towns. Huntingdon and St Ives had money left available for them, which we've delivered as part of this scheme.
I have to say to Pam and Sam that it's actually gone down quite well in St Ives. We've actually used it. We've delivered some, so it's been well received. I hate to rub it in. I don't mean at all. Really, I don't. No, seriously, I don't. Honestly, I don't. I don't. I really don't. But it's to compliment the team. Actually, come on. I wouldn't do that. I really wouldn't. Are there any other? Moving swiftly on. Are there any other questions, Pam?
All I was going to add, which might be, I don't know if this is going to be helpful or not, but obviously we are only a few months into this project. We're looking at the moment 11 grants, 6 have been in St Ives, so they're leading the way, 5 in Huntingdon. What we're looking at the moment is some of the grants have been quite small, and that's been a surprise to the team. I think one of the grants in St Ives it has been just a few £100s, but has made the difference for that owner to be able to do something. So at the moment we've got a commitment of only she says £26,000 out of the £200,000 budget. So what we have actually had some feedback from the combined authority, which we haven't requested. They've approached us to basically say that they really like shopfront grants, and if there was a willingness to see an expansion of the project wider than Huntingdon and St Ives, it would be something that they would be open to have a discussion on. So I would be really quite interested to sort of, and interestingly, we've already had the conversation with a couple of St Ives colleagues on the panel this evening about, if there are particular businesses that are known about where you feel would benefit from a sort of an injection of money that could then sort of have that realizing some improvements. Obviously, we're not looking at major retailers, so it would be sort of small organizations that are sort of, not the large sort of franchises or large companies, but it may well be something that we could explore, especially if we don't sort of in the next quarter start to see an upturn in that grant spend, because ultimately we don't want, as a district council, to hand funding back to the combined authority. And if they're already willing to consider opening up, then we would look to expand that. One of the things that we're already considering is whether we can expand the scope within St Ives and Huntingdon to look at the sort of the surrounding shopping areas rather than just the high street, if that makes sense. So I think if it's helpful, it's not a completely closed door at this moment in time. The combined authority are willing to look at widening the scope to include the other towns if we know of several opportunities, I would say.
Thank you, Pam. Sam, did you want to say something or?
Just that, thank you, Chair. Just that gives opportunity to underline and remind, of course, that part of what is in our mind in all of this project is opportunities for taking advantage of additional funding sources from wherever they might come, and that obviously was part of the rationale for the master plans that we've reframed, rechristened as vision documents that have been published since the last update as well. Not that that's a definitive list of things we'd want to seek money for either, but as we've seen with Ramsey as a most recent example, having projects that we can pull off the shelf as opportunities arise lets us sort of get in early and punch above our weight for Huntingdonshire compared with if we were starting from scratch each time. So that's certainly a matter that the team and the council and I have firmly in mind as well.
Thank you. I am conscious of the time. Are there any other questions? Because we've got briefly, Councillor Corney.
Very briefly, how quickly do you want the list to help the supporting document? Because
Tomorrow? No, I mean, I think seriously, I think, obviously I think as we've said in an earlier piece on the agenda this evening, you know your communities the best. And if there are organisations and businesses that you know of that could benefit from this, I think what we would just caveat it that obviously at the present time we have only got approval for Huntingdon and St Ives. But if we see that there isn't a huge upturn in grant take up because the grants are small compared to the sort of the 20,000s that I think we expected to receive, that we would be looking to see if we can open that out wider.
Just on that, and just to put some context to this, because obviously the Civic Hub in Ramsey that's ongoing at the moment. I know that I've been very involved in. We've had 2 canopies made that go over the 2 separate doors. One's for the office and one's for the meeting room. But just an old-fashioned shopfront canopy, £2,000. Which I was quite surprised at. This sort of a lot of work's gone into that, but just a little bit of context. So whereas these grants, where they can go, there's how much you can get for your money. So.
And I guess just the only thing I would like to come back on, we've tried to be as flexible with the grants that we've been issuing, so it doesn't, even though it is sort of a shopfront grant, if it's something else that would make sense within that building that would help that business, then we can be as flexible as we possibly can. So it doesn't have to be, a canopy or painting or it can be wider than that if that would be something that would be helpful.
Councillor Gordon.
Sorry, on that very point, would we be able to look at doing grants slightly further afield? You know where I'm going. You know where I'm going. You know where I'm going. Into the rural areas, into like small towns like Kimbolton, like the larger villages like Saltree, where they may well have small businesses that could just do with a bit of hand to help revitalise their shop fronts, in which case, that might help to bring in more shops to those areas as well, which would benefit the whole of Huntingdonshire, not just the town. So I do think we ought to be looking at that as well.
Councillor Gardner continues to make his case on behalf of his residents with firmness, and no, we appreciate that. So I think the sort of easy answer is that we are absolutely considering opportunities to support our economy in our market towns, in our slightly smaller towns, in our larger villages, in our smaller villages. This is a pot of funding designated for market towns, so we aren't able to use this for that. But we are there are other pots of money, for example, the Rural Prosperity Fund linked to the Shared Prosperity Fund. I may have used the rural element of the Shared Prosperity Fund, which we are going to be coming back to, that we've touched on at this committee previously. There are opportunities, not necessarily to fund that specifically, but to support businesses in rural areas that we are pursuing as fast as government funding and confirmation of details has allowed. So we will be coming back to you in due course on the shared prosperity and the rural fund element of that through this panel in the normal way, which you might be interested in.
Excellent. Can I assume that we're all finished? Thanks to Slade. Very briefly.
Thank you. Sorry, can I quickly just come back on my point? So I didn't get a chance to reply. So as much as I know there's a lot of money being spent in St Neots on other areas like High Street and Priory and all that sort of stuff, that's no consolation to the businesses who obviously want to improve their shop frontage. So I think just bear that in mind, that there's that disparity. I would be keen to know who these stakeholders, the small group of stakeholders who decided that they didn't want the money in St Neots. But maybe we take that up separately. Thank you.
Happy to do that. I suppose it's worth underlining, and also may not be terribly reassuring to your shop owners either. But the purpose of the Shopfront Grant Scheme isn't specifically to aid individual businesses. It's to reflect the value to the wider economy, including the businesses, of improving the attractiveness of our sort of shopping areas, helping increase footfall, helping encourage that positive cycle as more people come in to the town centre, more things become viable, we can support a more diverse local economy. And we very much intend and expect the much larger sums of money being spent in St Neots to be having that similar impact in making the town centre a desirable place to come and be, and to run events. And we're looking at enabling that more effectively, not least with the stage element that's touched on in the papers as well. So we are working hard in order to make St Neots a place that supports as much attraction of local business as possible, and it's on a scale beyond individual shopfront grants. But as Pam has touched on, we don't rule anything out, albeit it is not in scope at the moment. And we hear firmly your lobbying on behalf of your community. So thank you for that.
I'm never going to mention St Ives ever again. Right, moving hopefully on. Item 8. Now, this is going to involve exclusion of press and public. It's to resolve that the public be excluded from the meeting because the business to be transacted contains exempt information relating to the financial and business affairs of any particular person, including the authority holding that information.
So, as you've probably gathered, because Councillor Blackwell has a disclosable pecuniary interest in this item, she will now be leaving the room for this item.
Okay, good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
So we will obviously just, yes, I was going to say, does anybody want to grab a water? And the heating, I have had it confirmed, was turned off about an hour and 45 minutes ago, but it's obviously still taking its time to cool down. But if anybody wants to take this opportunity to grab a water before we move on, feel free to.
Comfort break. Don't drink any more water. Ian.